with Renee.
Yo. We wait all week and all day for more. Saturdays with Renee.
All right, welcome back to Black Liberation Media in this special report where we don't have to wait all week and all day for Saturdays with Renee. The special Tuesdays with Renee and Katina Parker from Feed Derm. So greetings to you both. Please, everybody, like, share, subscribe. Put this in your socials. And welcome. Good morning. Good afternoon, everybody.
I know it's afternoon now. They got me this morning too. So it's been a long Tuesdays of Renee.
That's right.
It's like, what was that? Tuesdays with Maury? Was that the book?
Yes.
That's it. Yep.
Well, welcome, Katina. I thank you for I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Thank you for having me back. The first time earlier this year was a tremendous experience. It was really exciting to connect with your audience and to follow some of the comments on the YouTube post. I do read the comments and do take them to heart. Hold on, someone's telling me to tilt my camera so my name is not on my face. There we go. Thank you for production advisement. Let me get myself
situated. Could you move the other way? Could you shift the other way? Whatever you just did there.
No, here.
The other side. The opposite. Move more that way. There you go. Now we can see your whole face.
But on screen for them, my CG, my lower third is going through my face.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, I think you have to, if you slide to your left.
If I slide to my left, my face is covered by the lower third. If I slide to my right.
Now you're covered. Unless, I don't know, maybe, am I seeing it?
Well, no, you're not.
What's
it's
happening?
Because it looks a little, I think the screen is smaller when you're on the StreamYard than it is on YouTube. So.
And then there's also the issue of the landscape versus the portrait. So folks, we got to make sure there. Let me just be honest with everybody. I don't know what's going on and how this works. So we have it set up. StreamYard has a new feature where you can do landscape or portrait. I've set us up to be in landscape, and yet we're getting both options anyway. So, and it sets up two separate streams on the channel. So if you log in through if you join the stream through the landscape, it's going to look different than in the portrait. And I don't know why we get two separate streams, and I haven't figured out. I don't know exactly how to fix that. So I apologize. So
but we got you in full now, Katina. You're good.
There you go. Now it seems like it's good to me, but if you're looking at it on something else, anyway.
People seem to say that this is better. So if this is where I need to be, this is where I will be. I was saying thank you for having me on the first time. I go back and read the comments periodically because it guides the work. All forms of feedback are indeed feedback, and it's helpful for me to see what people's questions are, what people are thinking, so we can keep building in the right direction. I wanted to be on today initially to talk about SNAP EBT response and how it was creating a lot of extra work for those of us who are doing community care work, in addition to what we were already doing, meaning need had already skyrocketed as of 2 years ago and has continued to go up, particularly amongst elder populations, and specifically, for us, for our work amongst Black elder populations. And need has gone up even more this year with all of the firings, whether it's from Target, whether it's from federal government. The federal government and Target are the top, or were the top two employers of Black folks. And so the Target boycott made sense, but also a lot of Black people lost their jobs. as a result of the boycott. And then the same thing with the federal government. You remember back in the day, our people would say that good government job, the good government job doesn't exist anymore. And a lot of the people who were fired were indeed our people. And so, we're facing unprecedented need. And then you put on top of that the denial of SNAP EBT benefits, which are not welfare and are
Did we just who's frozen? Am I the only one frozen or is
No, you're
Katina?
not frozen. It's
Okay.
Katina that's frozen. Uh-oh.
All right.
Let's see.
So Katina, hopefully we can get you to reboot or log back in. Um
All right. So I can just let while because she might not even realize that she froze yet. So Katina reached out last week before last, because we were going to try and get her on while this chaos was happening with the shutdown, and then everybody's schedule is a little crazy, so it wasn't possible. But I think even though the shutdown has ended, and even though they're trying to push through the funding and all these things, I think it's incumbent upon us to really pay attention to the fact that this happened, right? So the problem with all government funded programs is that whenever the government decides they're not going to do something anymore, they'll just not do it. And so I think Katina might be back. Give a thumbs up, Katina, if you're good.
yeah, okay, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I was just letting folks know that you had reached out while we were still in shutdown mode, but you can go ahead and come back. Just keep. I was just trying to fill space until we got you.
Oh, good. I was listening. I was listening. Well, there are multiple sides to government funded aid. The first thing is that we pay into these systems to offset the cost of living for low wage workers. And we have low wage workers because the government wants to stimulate the economy by creating a grocery store and restaurant environment where we can buy things at a fairly low cost. Most people who work in grocery stores stocking the shelves can't afford the food that they're stocking on the shelves, right? And what the government doesn't tell you, and what they've tried to manipulate for this particular media moment, is something like 34% of military families are on SNAP EBT. Period. Like you got families
I did
going.
not know it was that high.
You got families going to military families going to food pantries. Earlier this year, I was talking to somebody who's ex-military who was put out on disability, and now they're working another full-time job, and they were being denied their disability by the military because they're able to work, but they're also not able to serve in the military because the military's declared them disabled. And one of the things they revealed is that when they were younger and first entered the military, their refrigerator was often empty. They relied on food banks, and that young people entering the military get excited about war because they get double the pay to kill people, double and triple the pay to kill people. So they're literally paid and incentivized to murder Black and brown people in other countries. And then during times of peace, they are incentivized to want to be at war because they're low-key starved. And this is grooming. It's a type of collective grooming that stimulates our worst impulses and causes us to be our own worst enemy of humanity. So yeah, something like 34% of military families are on SNAP EBT, 37% white people on SNAP EBT. It is true that, by and large, the other 63% are a combination of Black and brown populations, which is one of the reasons that they felt comfortable, making cuts to SNAP EBT or delaying SNAP EBT. But it's not good math, even for them, because if white folks are indeed the majority in this country, and that is questionable, the way they do the census and everything. But if white folks are indeed the majority, it's still a very large number of white conservative voting people who are being affected by this. And so I'm really curious to see how people respond. I think I heard Renee, I think I heard you say if they did it once, they'll do it again. At current, last I saw, SNAP EBT benefits are only approved through December 15th, and the government is only funded through June 30th. I'm sorry, not June 30th, January 30th of next year. So, yeah, all these disruptions that we've seen in recent years, these hacks, whether real threats from other countries or fabricated as real threats from other countries, but coming from within, like all of it is practiced for some sort of widespread, massive disruption, whether planned or whether it's some sort of incidental accumulation of disruptions that happen. And we have to be prepared for that. Many of us who are connected to Black elders, particularly those in rural areas, know that they stay ready and that they stay wary of these types of, these types of disruptions because they've already seen it before. And we definitely have to get out of our comfort zone. You know, if you're dependent on grocery stores, I've been telling people, grow your own food, stock, have 3 months worth of something stocked if you can afford it. Today, I would like to talk through some of what's happening right now in the country, but I also want to talk through how we respond and how we take care of one another. And then as a result, how we build power together and shift this thing. So should I just go into it, or do you all? I mean, I just started talking. I didn't know if y'all.
Look, we did this because it went so well the last time you were here. I was like, oh wait, if she want to come back, let's let's go. So, Jared, unless you have a question, I think we can just let you cook. Is my theory on this, and then we'll go if there's any questions or anything from the audience and stuff. We can go from there.
Okay, thank you. And I'll be checking the chat too. I like for somebody to throw me the ball every once in a while. And I like to throw it back. So in talking about SNAP EBT, in the 80s, there was a real sham job done on welfare, the perception of who was on welfare. And Reagan in particular promoted this stereotype of single Black mom, bunch of kids, inner city, welfare, drag on the social safety net, right? We understand that this is reparations. And, speaking to what I was just sharing, that, for people to go to work at these restaurants, at these large warehouse oriented spaces where we shop, the depots, if you will, they're not making very much money. And so we pay into SNAP EBT in order to supplement what they don't work on the job so that they can actually eat and keep going to work. The moment you disrupt that, it actually disrupts the entire nation's economy and supply chain. You create childcare crises and all these other types of crises, right? When you add to that these localized ICE raids that are practiced for us, us as in the Black folks who have come to believe that we belong here and that we will always be here because, in our minds, we earned our keep, through slavery. They can deport us just like they're deporting all these brown folks. And initially it was brown folks, but last month, was it? Canal Street, New York. I was there 2 days before they did the sweep. I was riding through Harlem with some friends, and we were commenting on how all the Africans were still out selling the bags and everything, and how, they're not afraid of ICE and da-da-da-da. 2 days later, ICE came through and swept there too. That's Africans. They don't know the difference between American-born Africanized people and African-born Africanized people.
Wait, you mean we're not all supposed to work together, Katina? That's crazy talk. Don't be crazy. Don't be crazy.
Well, like, that's not our fight. And I'm like, you do understand numbers, right? Like once, like the way that they get to what they want to get to is by thinning out the numbers. So they start with, the people And that's the whole social hierarchy is set up that way, that the lower you are on the hierarchy, the more expendable, the more disposable you are, right? And so I say this for the ones in the back. If you believe that our struggle is not tied to the struggle of brown people who are being ejected from this country without due process, then you are in trouble. And because you are in trouble, we may also be in trouble. Like, we all need to get on the same page. We cannot have folks just sweeping through our neighborhoods, scooping up brown people, because next it will be our uncles, it will be our cousins, particularly the ones with warrants. It will be some of everybody that we're connected to, and eventually it will be us.
Right.
And so,
And just real quick, like, let's not forget that when they went through and pulled people out of their beds in the middle of the night in Chicago, there were not only people from the diaspora living in that building. They pulled people who were U.S. citizens. They pulled people who were quote unquote foundational Black Americans. They didn't ask no questions before they pulled. And
but were they foundational, Renee?
Listen,
how close, how many enslaved ancestors in the United States did they actually have?
Quote
and
unquote.
Aren't these brown people being snatched up now, freeing up jobs for these truly Black Americans?
Right. And the person who had the warrant got transferred direct to the Chicago Police Department. So, this game that people are playing about this, I'm glad you brought it up. This game is a dangerous one, and everyone's going to lose in the end if folks don't start getting it together.
Well, the way America works is you get journal entry, right? Like general admission at the show. And very few get to come in on the VIP pass. General admission is always the grunt work. It is a type of assimilation that has worked very well for this system over the last 400, 500 years, in that people enter the country as servants to the wealthy class, right? And so there you are proselytized, and you learn the ways of the wealthy, and you learn what you have to do to survive in this country. You also learn to want what the wealthy have, right, as aspiration. And so you begin to take on their image and likeness in order to obtain social credibility, right? And so there's a clear path to entry to this country. You scrub toilets, you clean for folks, you take care of these white folks' kids, you raise their children, and you work in the fields, right? And then there are these elevated jobs if you are attractive and intelligent. Does this sound familiar? You get to work much closer to them. You get to carry their golf clubs, and you get to work in the house, and be basically the second layer in the household to the first layer, which would be the family, right? And I'm saying the house, whether it's the company, whether it's the physical home, like this is how it works. And so when you start cutting out those layers, it actually hurts them too. But what we know is the short-term, long-term game is mass extermination of a lot of people, and to replace us with a robot class. Now, I say that to some people, and they think it's just Debbie Downer. Some of us were born for this time, and the plans they have for me are not the plans that are going to happen. I'm saying the plans they have for we are not the plans that have to happen if we do what is necessary, but we really do have to get over our own social conditioning. One of the things that concerns me right now is how busy people are, like over busy, in many cases too busy to buckle down and do what is necessary to make sure that you can eat 3 months from now, 4 months from, and not just you, that your neighbors can eat 3 months from now, 4 months from now, right? Like, we have to stop and put food in the ground, or make associations with people we trust to put food in the ground. And these are arrangements. It's not just that we're tasking them with putting the food in the ground for us. It's that we recognize in ourselves some sort of valuable skill set that we can leverage, right? You grow the food, I sew, or you grow the food, I take care of the kids. Like, we have to invest deeply in these relationships, right? And sometimes when I say this, I get a lot of pushback from people saying, well, I don't have community. I hear you. That's your clarion call. You better figure it out, because you cannot survive this on your own, right? And one of the reasons I know that we are able to win this, if there is a win, is because by and large, white ideology is about rugged individualism. And when you look at the prepper state, the prepper mentality, they imagine themselves and set themselves up to be on these like many, many acres of land, one family, drilling rights. They can hunt and kill and grow at will, but no society has ever envisioned a future of survival where there are essentially singular winners. Survival as a strategy is always a collective vision, right? And so we have to get out of our own socialization as being rugged individualists, right? Like we are socialized to think of our households as an individual thing, right? Like that happens it's in community, but it's independent of community, meaning when things get rough in our household, we, kind of retreat, right? And in traditional communities, when you retreat, people will come find you, right? But many of us are in spaces these days where you retreat and people may not come look for you. Well, that's not community, right? You need somebody who will come find you and say, what's going on? How can I support? And you also need to be that person in the lives of the people around you. So if you don't have community, I don't want to hear you be angry about it. That's not going to help you. Um, you have to figure out how you can form community, not online, but within walking distance of where you live. And if you do not have it, you have to consider living someplace else. Short term, long term, like maybe you can stay where you are for the time being. And then when things shift, you go to the place where you have some sort of setup and can be with people. But you can't survive this driving across town, making phone calls, so on and so forth. Like we're in North Carolina, many of us who are on this call, and ICE came to North Carolina last Friday. I was in, well, Charlotte specifically. I was in Charlotte for a friend's wedding the day that they came, and you could feel a real shift in the city. The friend with whom I stayed lives in a community that is traditionally Black, but has become brown in recent years. And she was saying that she, and her husband had been sitting out and they had seen someone that looked like ICE rolling through. A-Rob is also saying Border Patrol. Yes. I'll come to that too. But anywho, I'm on a shoot right now and my feed is full of these monster looking people like running through fields and running through communities, tackling everyday citizens. And it's barbaric, it's horrific. I see them smashing out windows, doing things that, when we were protesting for Ferguson, those of us who were in the BLM hotspots, there are literally young people rotting in jail right now for doing less, and in relation to those protests for property damage, specifically, over their friends and brothers being murdered in the streets. And now Border Patrol is in Durham and folks are preparing there. These are test cases. These are test runs. And I do see some level of protest, the whistles that are being passed out, the people who are live streaming from those spaces. But we have to do more to push back against this. And I'm saying we Black folks, but we also, for those of us who are connected to white people and white power structures, have to push white people to do more because they suffer too. Like, for better, for worse, the American experiment, we are all connected and all interconnected in this particular system that has been set up with us, by force. And so we really do have to look out for one another. I'm going to pause for just a moment in case there's any comments, questions that you all want me to answer. I feel like I'm just
no, you're not rambling at all, actually. And but I know that feeling when you're like, is everybody listening? So The question that I have is, you made mention of like, go find community. So and this is always the trick whenever you're dealing with people in like real life things, right? Like, if you found a space and there is doing the community because of wherever it happens to be where you are is not doable, but it's the space where you can afford to live, right? Like, what are the thoughts on like how can people, because this is the setup, right? You're set up to believe that you have to stay where you are in the circumstance that you're in because it's the thing that you can afford to do in this moment. And if you give this thing up, you might not get anything, and now you're going to be in a worse position, right? There's always that inherent fear of what happens if I give up the thing that I have, or if I speak out about the thing that's not safe to speak. Like, there's a fear that's not necessarily unreasonable, but truly hinders people from being able to do the things that are not only best for themselves, but best for the larger beings of community, right? Like the larger system, whatever we want to call, like looking at everybody when you're in consideration of like what is best for everybody. Like, not having genocide is best for everybody, but not everybody is willing to say that out loud, right? So what are your thoughts about kind of struggling with that fear, like that real, it's not inconsequential. Like, you're essentially saying, like, if you're in a place where you can't turn to your neighbor and get help, go find somewhere else to be. But there's fear in that. So how do we kind of navigate that situation, that fear for people?
Thank you for that. I'm gonna back in, like this, like a wide body, wide body vehicle. I help people eat, but and my primary orientation to the world is as a filmmaker and a photographer and a writer. I am currently I have multiple documentaries in production, but there are two in particular that receive a lot of my time and attention. One is a docu-series with Saul Williams about creative disruption and political resistance. And Saul is a longtime friend. We've done, a few things off and on over the years. In this particular moment, he is a clarion voice of reason around what is right and wrong. And as traditional media buckles and has buckled, to the current administration, and we see no integrity, we see no will to do the right thing. Our artists really are our last vanguard for the telling and speaking of truth, right? Like, one of the things we have to figure out, even in finding community, is how we stay connected to truthful sources, because within a year, you won't be able to trust much of anything that you see online or in the news, which is why community becomes even more important, right? Like, if you're isolated and most of your information comes from the internet, then that is a powerful and dangerous vortex in which to live, meaning you don't have anybody to say, is this AI? To bounce those kind of ideas, up against, and you don't have anybody to, tell you in the phone call sort of way, hurry, something's coming, right? Instead you have the internet telling you everything is okay, right? So having real live one-on-one, one-on-many relationships is important. And one of the ways people get there, I have found out, is through volunteering. I did not know this prior to Feed Durham, because I have not traditionally been a joiner of things. I've been an artist who just naturally finds myself in different communities that are deeply meaningful. And I'm a lifer. I'm somebody who maintains long-term relationships, 20, 30, 40 years, for as long as I've been alive. That's just in my makeup. It's the kind of family from which I come. The other project Uh, and this also speaks to speaking up. I'm doing a documentary with Phil Wilson, the father of the Black AIDS movement. That's actually where I'm heading after this, to film with him. And if you don't know Phil, it's worth reading what you can online. Phil is the reason that a lot of us are alive today. 20 years ago, the CDC declared that 50% of Black gay men were HIV positive. And for those of you who are straight identified, but sleep with men, or straight identified and sleep with women who sleep with men who sleep with men, you have to understand how AIDS, HIV/AIDS, is transmitted. Initially when AIDS came out in the early '80s, it was declared a gay cancer, and they meaning the government did nothing to treat it for the first 4 years until Reagan's good friend Rock Hudson died, and people found out that he was gay. Treatment and support did not come to Black communities for many, many years later, even though Black folks were disproportionately affected. This matters because they're messing with PrEP. The reason HIV stopped being a death sentence is because Black folks finally got low cost or free access to PrEP. I don't know the exact number, but I know that PrEP is very expensive, in the tens of thousands of dollars, if your health insurance doesn't cover it. And for many years, these treatments were available over in Europe, and only the people who have money to fly to Europe to get the treatment got the treatment, which created a class of, this is way off in the wormhole, but it matters. It created a class of wealthy, white, gay men who are part of the power structure, who vote Democrat, who vote Republican. They play on both sides. It created a class of people who survived, right, versus all of us who were struggling. Like Black women were struggling mightily with HIV, right? So Sunday, I was at an event where they unveiled the AIDS Monument LA. And Phil Wilson, the person with whom I'm doing the documentary, he was there. Representative Maxine Waters, Auntie Maxine, she was there for the entire presentation. She and Phil are close friends. And Maxine Waters has been a part of the HIV/AIDS movement for decades. Was one of the first Black straight identified people to insist on resources and funding for Black folks when they were allowing us to just die in our homes untreated. What all this is set up to say, this room was mostly white gay men. And even in that space, there was this spirit of do or die fight, 40 years later, after for them, they have overcome this disease through their organizing, through their resource. But they learn that lesson so well through tragedy. Many of them are like me. I'm 51 years old, and I have one friend from 25 years ago. Everybody else is dead, right? And the people who exist to tell this story now, they exist because they organized like their lives depended on it, right? We do not need to see the sort of massive die-off that we saw in the 80s, right, in the 90s, again, before we get that lesson. Like we can look at history right now and say, this has already happened, right? We have to act in a way that our lives depend on it. And I'm offering like HIV/AIDS organizing as an example, because when you look at Black resistance to HIV/AIDS, when you look at early white resistance to HIV/AIDS, like before it became nonprofit industrial complex type work, there's just an urgency there. There is a I don't care what happens after I say what I'm saying there, that we have to employ now, right? And when we talk about the finding of community and the risks that we take to find community, we're conditioned not to take risks. It's why we seem so quiet right now, even as these horrific atrocities are accumulating before us, right? I think it really is a question of whether you want to live or whether you want to die. And And if you frame that, like, if you can frame that for yourself, I don't have to give you a whole lot of words to figure out how to take the risk. But if you are sitting in an apartment, disconnected from land, disconnected from your neighbors, disconnected from a water source, you are in trouble. I'm ringing the alarm. If you haven't run, like, and you already know you're in trouble. I'm just confirming what you've talked yourself out of. You are in trouble. You have to figure this out. You have to seek out people and resources who can help you figure it out. You can contact Feed Durham, but if we're not local for you, there are people in your neighborhood, there are people in your community who are in the same process of figuring it out. And there are people who've already figured it out. There are a lot of Black folks. I said this on the last show. There are a lot of Black folks, a lot of brown folks, a lot of good leaning white folks. I wanted to, phrase that correctly. But there are a lot of people who took to the land 5 and 10 years ago and began, buying, to the extent that you can buy land, buying up large parcels of land, making sure they had drilling rights, inviting other people onto the land, practicing survival skill sets. America over the last 10, 15 years has really sold us the illusion of comfort and leisure. When I look at some of the Black folks in their 30s, and it's no critique, we say they've been living their best life, right? Well, to live your best life in this world, it always comes at the expense of somebody who's living their worst life, And if you don't have if you're not making the social assessments around that, like, when I take this trip to such and such, what's the footprint? What does it cost in terms of air pollution? Who does that affect? Yes, I might be contributing to somebody's local tourist economy, but in what ways does that tourist economy keep those people in lockstep with their own oppression? We have to be making those sort of analyses. We've been sold the illusion of like lo-fi celebrity, which also borders upon narcissism. And so, the biggest threat to our future right now is not them, it's us. It's our want for things that we don't need. It's our want for experiences that we may not need, right? Like, we have to be selective at this time in terms of how we spend our resource, and the biggest resource is time. So I'll say this. When we talked a few months ago, I was hosting these Wednesday dinners and work days, and people would, come by. I would cook for them. We'd do some garden work. We would learn some things together. We were doing plant medicine skill shares and everything. And one of the things I observed was people standing around with hammers in hand and talking. And I would tell them, I can tell, I would say, I can tell that you're coming from a place of privilege, because people who are hungry, they work while they talk, or they don't talk at all and they just do the work, right? Like, if there was a meaningful payoff for you personally at the end of this, in terms of you're going to be able to feed your family, you'd be organizing yourself differently right now. Had that conversation many times. Black folks, white folks, brown folks, people who are of the organizing class, if you will. And what I came to know is that cognitively, we understand that something really bad is in our midst and that we need to respond to it. But the way white supremacy socializes all of us is to completely disregard your gut instinct, particularly if you're female bodied. If you're female bodied, you're essentially set up to be a breeder for the state. You're taught to ignore your gut instincts, so that you will be subject to the advances of men. And so that you won't insist on free will or rights, or any of those pesky boundaries that are disruptive to being able to produce offspring for for the state, for the state project. I lost my train of thought. What y'all want to know?
Well, there is a question in the chat. Jared, did you have something? So this is from Latif. And he says, engage and create a community outside the next door neighbors. I'd even argue your neighbors today don't equate to what I'd consider my community. And it's an interesting theory that you can have community that's not necessarily next door per se. And I'm curious. So, like I already, and the joke in my house is I already know that if something goes really wrong, I need to get like 200 or so miles to my mother, right? Absolutely. Because she had, like, she's good, right? So she's got enough. Like she grows her own food and, the whole thing. So, so I know that for a fact. That said, I live in a neighborhood that happens to be very much connected and, and we all chat and all those things. So if there was a near emergency where people needed something, because it's happened before, like there was an issue with the water. So all the people who had bottles of water were like, okay, these are the houses where there are bottles of water if people need water, right? And so, but that, like, I know that's not everybody and everywhere. So what do you think of this idea of having community that's not necessarily next door, but that you can turn to if you come into a space of crisis?
Well, those of us who come from traditional communities have to teach community. And the greatest work that I do now, and the work that I encourage my friends, including Saul, to do is teach community. Because Saul comes from, I'm speaking of Saul Williams. He comes from a very rich artistic community, yes, that spans New York and really the entire globe. But even before that, he, like me, like others, we are from these Black communities that were absolutely necessary to the civil rights struggle wherever we grew up, respectively. I am from Oklahoma, and I come from a small Black area called Green Pastures. Per capita, or per, whatever you call it, but in that small area, most of the civil rights organizing structure in the state of Oklahoma came from that particular footprint. And I'm still deeply tied to that place, to my aunties, to my uncles, to their legacies in Black rodeo and civil rights organizing and Black Native solidarity. We're all Black Indian. I know what community is. I know what it's like to grow up in a place where we never called the police. Like, it wasn't even a thought. The police, you know what I mean? Like, you didn't call 911. It just never even came up. When there were emergencies, the 911 was that rotary. It was those 7 digits that you dialed, whoever your first person was. And because everybody was so connected, you didn't have to do like a quick check-in. This is how we're gonna, you call that first person and everybody just knew how to act, but that comes from being in space together over many months sometimes, but also over many years. The more time you spend together, the more you act like a herd, the more you act like a pack, right? These people behave in herd and pack mentality. That's typical for rural people who are interdependent, right? When you move to city structures, people move to cities to be anonymous, to become anonymous, and to experience anonymity. Well, anonymity is the antithesis of community. So when rural people come to inner city environments, urban environments, and they see people just laying down on the streets, it is mind-boggling to them. Like, and it's a trick. It becomes like a trigger point. They cannot understand that the social safety net is so unforgiving that people who have, cousins, mamas, families are just laying on the street untended to. And these are the people who I meet because they're new to the city and they don't quite have, they might be working a low wage job and they need food so they can feed, the person they see sleeping outside the Dollar Tree, right? um the way we do community now, uh a lot of us is not community. And I say a lot of us, like what we have become, and some of this is COVID related. It's the trauma and the dysmorphia that we all carry from, like, everybody that I know understands that time changed during COVID. And there was a period of emergence where the things we used to do, we would try to do them, and it just felt like, you couldn't quite get it together, whether it was flying or, drying, driving, the same routes that you used to drive to visit, family in other places. Like everything just felt off for a long time. And part of the reason we see so much, I see so much pushback to doing the things that are necessary to survive this next front, this next threat, is, people are still triggered by the shutdown experience, and the isolation, the disruption to the lives that they thought they were supposed to be, having the experiences. And so I see people basically getting ready for winter in a very interesting way. Instead of putting food in the ground and burying nuts, I see people taking as many trips as possible, because they might not be able to take trips again for a while, or like having as much fun as possible in the name of refilling that joy cup. And I understand, that is a defense mechanism, but you have to you have to find a way to create some balance, to do some of those things, but also do the things that will, keep you alive. And I'm going to keep hitting that thing. In terms of finding community, I know Ash has heard me say this before. One of the things that we have to accept is that everybody doesn't want to be here anymore. And in the same way that you can only save drowning people who want to stay above water, we can only save and protect, those of us who want to stay above water. I have heard people say they don't want to be here for the collapse, and we have to respect people's choices, no matter how much Christianity has, this brand of Christianity has. Taken away people's free will to live and die with dignity, right? And that's a whole nother conversation, but I'm just saying, be mindful of it. We can't take people kicking and screaming into the future. And, the time that you spend trying to pull that person along, is time that you could spend preparing, for yourself, and maybe also preparing a little bit more for them too, in case they decide that they do want to stay and be a part of the fight. But that is where our focus needs to be as much as possible, preparing ourselves to sustain, ourselves, so that we can be a part of the shift that's coming. If only one set of people can be left standing, which I don't believe, I think there'll be multiple sets, but if only one is going to be left standing, it needs to be the people who are good for the planet. Like this planet, whatever God you serve, if you serve, like it we only have like a limited time left on this planet in its current iteration, where we get to do the most good that can be done, on the planet, and that time is now. So, community, how do you find it? How you define it? To me, community is, I'll talk within the context of Feed Durham. Right now, we are organizing against these attacks on our brown neighbors, which are not selective. As you said, Jared, they scoop up everybody. Oops, I got you and you got a warrant. Well, come on. You know what I mean? And that might be some of your people. So it looks like for people like me who are in leadership, it looks like being able to say, I can help. I have limited capacity to help. These are the things that I'm uniquely qualified to do, given my skill set and my resources and my networks. These are the other things that need to be done. Who's going to take a piece? And even in making the assessment about the other things that need to be done, it's other friends, other collaborators, looking at that plan and saying, Katina, how about this? We also need this, right? And then we also need this. They go and get it for us, meaning I'm not being tasked with yet another thing to do when I already work a 90-hour week. And much of that time is spent figuring out how to help our folks, stay afloat. It means that when you go, I mean, it's simple stuff that many of us know. You go by your elderly neighbor's house, or some woman with a family, or whoever, and you see that their grass hasn't been cut in a long time, and you check in. Do you want your grass cut? They may be like me. I don't cut my grass because I'm a naturalist, and I actually want the green things out there to soak up, the pollutants. But most people are Americanized and do want their grass cut. So it's offering to cut that grass so that, especially if you're in an HOA type situation, that person's not incurring fees. It's what I see people doing now, that I wish they had done sooner, because in America we are socialized to respond to crisis, and because of our own personal ecology, which is just ass backwards. Like, we spend so much time working, often at jobs that aren't meaningful. Like, if your job, if you are just doing a job to bring home money to support your household, everybody understands that. But often enough, that job actually contributes to your oppression, right? So, I mean, this is how colonialism and capitalism are set up, so we're always doing this. We're always in the cycle of securing and promoting and maintaining our own oppression. Like, they really don't even have to do much at this point. But yeah, if you're always in that trap, then it doesn't leave much time to follow your hunches about survival, right? And so then you need people to come in and help you think about and plan for your survival. So there's a lot of work and opportunity there in terms of building community. But most of all, the way that we build community is around food. It's always around food. It's around gardens. It's around eating together. Food seems simple enough, but food is one of the most political things that happens in this country. Food is the first way that in this country whether you matter or not. Starting with first grade or all day school, whether you're on the lunch program, whether you bring your food in. If you're on the breakfast and lunch program, the quality of that food is a natural determinant for your capacity to learn, the behavioral issues that you're going to experience, if you're not eating balanced meals or not eating at all. Obviously, those kids wind up in the office more often than the other children. And then there are other reasons why they wind up in the office, because, those lunch programs, line up pretty much with like the racial composition of the school too. So there's the presence of implicit and explicit bias that send our kids to the front office. And we know that third grade is when the school to prison pipeline becomes a very real phenomena for Black boys. That Black boys are beloved, within school settings, particularly by their white female teachers up until around the second grade. And then that jump happens, the hormones start to kick in. Black and brown kids tend to sexually mature sooner than white children. We tend to start smelling and sprouting up sooner than white children. And so all that implicit bias, starts to kick up. And the place where it plays out the most is what type of food is offered to our children and the withholding of that food, right? Um, it's the place where you look at your plate and you look at your white counterpart's plate, and you know what this world has in store for you. You know, if their plate is colorful and fun and has options, and your plate has textures that roughly look the same and everything is brown and doesn't appear to be edible or attractive, um, that's a low feeling, and it doesn't go away. You know, I don't. I was hungry a lot as a second and third grader, and really can't articulate the terror of, you know, being that kind of hungry 2 hours before lunch is supposed to happen, and, you know, I'm still expected to focus and learn phonics. um, I at least had a lunch, but there are children who go literally all day without food and are expected to learn, or not, you know, or not expected to learn. So, you know, a lot of our community building should be around food, and a lot of our leveling of the playing field should be around food. You know, at Feed Durham, one of the things that we've really pushed for, and like been like obvious, you know, flamboyant about, is these colorful plates, tasty, nutrient dense, culturally relevant meals. You know, culturally relevant to Black culture. Excuse me. And also, when we're not cooking, the quality of produce and packaged foods that we put out, you know, it's organic. It's, you know, getting these high-end snacks, getting Big Spoon Roasters, who charges, you know, 12, 13, $14 for a jar of peanut butter at Whole Foods, getting them to donate what they call their community blend, you know, to Feed Durham so we can gift it to our people. um, you give people dignity. You know, you restore people's dignity when you give them a good meal and treat them with honor and respect. So if you're feeling lonely, find some way to volunteer in relation to food work, high quality food work. If they're not, I'm saying lonely, if you're feeling isolated, if they're not doing high quality food work, then find somewhere else and become a part of that. But don't waste any time. Like when we get off this call, go figure your stuff out. Go continue figuring your stuff out, how you are going to not just be in community, but return to community. And, you know, one thing I'll say, I encounter a lot of young Black folks who are so wounded by their experiences with their families, particularly young Black queer folks, that they don't have mentorship, they don't have relationships with adults. And um, it's shocking to me because I love old people and spend most of my time with people who are 20 and 30 years my senior. um, I learned at an early age how to talk to and navigate, you know, old people, and, or I should say elders, and you know what to say, what to challenge in them, and what to just let go, because that's not my work, that's not my business. It is a real skill set, and when you have it, like so much more is available to you, right? Like we need relationships with elders so that we know what's up ahead for us. And, you know, for me at this point, it's menopause. It's at some point being retirement age, even though I don't foresee retiring because I love what I do. And eventually, it's dying. And those things may sound like, oh, like heavy. They don't feel heavy for me because I have elders that I see navigating, you know, all of these life landmarks, um, with grace and imperfection. And if you don't have those relationships, that is a big part of what contributes to feelings of being isolated, feelings of not, you know, being in community. And, you know, that I don't have, I have ideas about how to heal those generational rifts in Black communities. I don't have the bandwidth personally to do it at this time, but we'd be happy to contribute to an effort that helps people get reconnected in that way, helps people establish, best practices and understanding, so that they can learn together and walk together.
Thank you. Couple of notes from the chat. I actually really like this suggestion. TNB at HBCU Fantasy Sports says the challenge for today and this week is to walk your block. If you can meet 3 to 4 people, take note of them in their lives and situation. I like that idea. I think it's a good one to kind of just wander your neighborhood and see who your neighbors are. And he also says, they also say, look out for holiday food drives this week. Our church is doing this week instead of next. So that's also some place to look. I find that people, oh, and Tafari is asking if y'all can get up. So.
Absolutely, Tafari.
So we'll have to.
Anybody want to talk to me? Y'all know how to find me. I'm findable.
This conversation about navigating community is a big one, and I feel like we've been trying to figure out in this space. And Jared, you can. I don't know if you have any thoughts about this, but because you also live in these tree-lined streets, and so, but really thinking about how we can help people to navigate finding community, right? Like we're all like there's a big space between me and Jared, but I know that if I end up on 95 South, anywhere within running, driving, biking to Jared's house, that if I go there, he's not going to close the door on me, right? Like, so I do think there's room for this conversation about, figuring out, do you have people that maybe aren't close to you, but that you can rely on and that you can, try to get to should you have the need to be away from the space where you are. I'm not sure. I actually think that might be a good, I don't know. And I don't know how we would even do it, honestly, like to try and create like these like spaces where people know, like, this is a space where if you are part of this Black Liberation Media family, like here's a space if you need to get somewhere, that type of, and I don't know if it's a crazy thought. I don't know. Jared, what do you think?
It's never crazy. That's not crazy. But you asked Jared, so I'll be quiet.
No, I'm perfectly happy to hear more from Katina on this as well. I don't have, like, I'm particularly at this stage in my life, I'm open to many different options, formations, efforts, and trying various new approaches. So still trying to figure out how to contribute best from these pockets of spaces. But yeah, go ahead, Katina. Yeah.
I'm excited about this possibility. It actually makes me a little teary-eyed. Because the thing that we're not speaking to is how much hurt people are carrying and why they shrink away from community, how traumatized people have been in their families, in their churches, and in certain community spaces where there is no accountability around, harmful people doing harmful things. And I don't go to church anymore. Sorry to my great grandmother, because I can feel her, rattling around somewhere. I don't go to church like that anymore, but church lives in me, meaning like the best of what I learned there What I know is that Black folks, by and large, and brown folks, inherently good. That we value the preservation of life in a general way. And when I see us acting in ways that are, when I see us participating in our own self degradation, that is indicative of some sort of ancestral trauma that needs to be addressed. And that work is for it's for the spirit workers. I am a spirit worker. I go case by case. Feed Durham has been an interesting is not the right word, overwhelming spiritual assignment, because as an artist, I get to pick and choose who breathes, who we breathe the same air, right? And for artists who create in the way that I do, it's essential, for like our own like spiritual sustainability, to be selective about who we allow in our midst. But when you're doing people work, and you have this sort of, set up this sort of requirement, you really need flanking, you need spiritual boundaries around you to do this type of work, because if not, you become accessible to all kinds of negative things that want to extinguish your light and prevent the good things that you are contributing to community, right? And so what I'm speaking to is that there are reasons people aren't in community. People aren't in community because community doesn't always feel safe for folks. Certain communities don't feel safe. And what we've gone out of our way to do within the context of Feed Durham is create spaces where some of everybody can show up, where I don't have the right word, but the work is outside of cooking, outside of the specific cultural Black cult and Native cultural practice of cooking. The work is, I don't have the word right now, but the work is such that everybody from every background can contribute. It's equalizing work, right? And when you're doing the work of gardening alongside somebody who is similar or different, what you all have in common is the understanding that there's magic. Like you're facilitating some sort of magical process, right? That is going to result in a magical thing that somebody gets to experience as, and I'm saying magic, as magic and blessing, right? And so to foster community, you have to have these equalizing moments, opportunities, so that some of everybody can participate, right? Like our idea of community now is not community. It's people who are like us, people who want to do CrossFit, at 5 a.m. on a Saturday, or people who want to play basketball on certain days of the week. But in fact, community is some of everybody, some of everybody except those who are deemed harmful in ways that are just not forgivable. So the people who take life, the child molesters, who like literally take a soul's life, in that moment. The people who exhibit certain types of violences. And in traditional cultures, in village structures, those people aren't tolerated. They're put out into the world, into the woods for the animals, for the wild things to take, right? But because that's understood, people govern themselves accordingly, right? In the same way, this is not a great parallel, but in the same way within our own family structures, there's certain things that we don't say or do because we don't want to be ejected from the family, right? Like if you're in a Christian family and you don't feel very Christian anymore, it may take you a long time to tell your family, I don't feel Christian anymore, because you want to still be included, not necessarily in the rites, but all the other things that the family does around that Christian worship, right? If you're gay and you're in a super Christian family, you may not want to tell them that you're gay, because then they're going to like treat you differently. So we're already wired to want to fit in ways that sometimes are to our detriment, right? Like the detriment of our own integrity. But we can be wired to want to fit in ways that are actually in service of community, right? And so these are the kind of communities that we do have to build, like communities that are where we are absolutely accountable to one another, where we can have difficult, grounded conversations, and where we have the patience to maybe not solve it in a day, but like the love for one another, the respect for one another, to say, I'm going to leave this here. I'm going to go live some more. I'm going to grow some more. God's going to bring me more experiences that speak to this tension. And I promise I'll be back. Right. And then you just, like, you stay in that conversation, like the people, we're taught here to fear conflict, but our best teachers are the people who bring us conflict, because they point us to ourselves. But in America, we spend so much time, ostracizing that person. Like we treat conflict as if, often enough, as if it is a disturbance of our peace. And sometimes it is, but I find that more often than not, the conflict that we experience, it's our own inner conflict. It's our own lack of resolution around our misalignments, right? I have a longtime friend who we've been having some difficulties. I done broke up with everybody white in my life this year, just about overprivilege, and have been breaking up with my own self, and the silences I have been holding in those relationships in order to focus on what we had in common, right? Because that's what going to these integrated schools required for peace. If I talked about my inner city life in those settings, one, I was alone. And so I was basically told that I was lying. And again, social inclusion, you want to be included. So you learn to focus on the things that you like together, on the MTV music videos that you like together, on the Bart Simpson that you like together. Of course, we had Black Bart. But, I say all of that to say that, I've been in a struggle with many of my white friends around their sense of privilege, by their unwillingness to bear witness in meaningful ways to my life experience, and not just my life experience, but the experiences of particularly my cousins, my family members who have different types of opportunities than I've had. I was tracked out in a particular way, but most of the people that I love most were not tracked in that way, and don't have proximity to whiteness in the way that I've had, and are absolutely stunning human beings who have great families, and I am deeply moved by what they've been able to create for themselves, despite despite the lack of support offered to them by the same social structures that benefited me. And so when we speak about community, we have to take all these things into account. In my world, community is the church mother. It's Mother Orange, who still prays for me, and she's 89, and our families literally go back 100 years, across many Black towns in Oklahoma, living in many Black towns together. It is Joyce Henderson, whose mother taught me in Sunday school. It is Clara Looper, who started the sit-in movement in Oklahoma, and who taught my mother and my aunts and my uncles. And it's a whole host. It's my uncle who baptized all of us. It's these respectable characters in community, but it is also the man who lives in the field across from some family members of mine who practices hoodoo. Be putting hexes on folks, talking to the spirits, but also blessing folks too. It is that person, right? Now in the country, there's a place for him. He can live in the field and do his spirit work, and people are wary of him, but they really don't know what he's doing. You know what I mean? Like he's a conductor. Like he's doing a range of things out in those woods that actually benefit all of us, right? Even though we're afraid of it. Well, in the city, that man is homeless. In the city, he's without a home, and he's considered a social pariah, and he's somebody that we want to sweep um, out of like public space. We want to like, we don't care where he goes, he's just got to go, right? And I talk about this, that the watchers, which is what homeless people are in rural society, the watchers, the people, and in an inner city society too, like the people who always know what's going on in your community, that's your community too. And they can't remain invisible in our lives. Now you can't be friends with everybody. We're not going to go like skipping off white with no boundaries and no defenses. But we have to be able to look past our own social conditioning to really see into one another's humanity. Like no matter what the cloak is, we have to be able to see into one another's humanity, and connect where we can beyond what we've been doing. It can't just be the monolith, the people who look like you, sound like you, smell like you, dress like you, talk like you. In nature, biodiversity is the only thing that survives. I'm gonna say this real quick. There's a podcast. I'll send it out maybe through Jared and Renee that you should listen to. It's a Native podcast. I was listening to this podcast about controlled burning and traditional Native culture, and they were talking about how white people essentially told them they couldn't burn in their forests anymore, and then of course white people take over the forests as park rangers and whatnot, and they do controlled burning. And they were saying that when you look out and you see tree lines that are even with all the same tree, one, white people grew those trees. But that's not natural, right? And it's actually very dangerous to have all the trees the same height, looking the same. There's no biodiversity there. In that setting, when you like white people, the white mind is very compartmentalized, so it's like these trees go here, and then we're going to grow these tomatoes here, and then we're going to put these beans over here. What we know is that depletes the soil. What traditional people know is that we need companion and complementary planting, right? And that is how you have a very rich, sustainable, biodiverse environment, right? And when you have all these trees that are the same, born around the same time, it makes them susceptible to disease. It makes them susceptible to certain fungi and to certain plagues, right? And then all these trees people are no different. You have to be able to connect with people who are different than you.
People, I'll take this opportunity to again plug this Crushing Wheelchairs film that Poor Magazine has just produced, and we would like to start trying to find ways to get screenings for and to support that houseless community. And this amazing film in documenting that particular struggle here in the U.S. So please check that interview, and just putting that out there again, because I definitely vibe and agree with the point that Katina just made about we have to be in greater engagement and work with a lot of folks, all these folks. And Lateef, I don't know where you can see the film yet. We're trying to find places to screen the film, to fundraise, to purchase theater space, and and to the extent we can, to bring the filmmakers out to those events, to further talk about and build, and hopefully fundraise for their broader efforts too. So that's where we are. So I don't have a plan of action yet. I'm just throwing it out there, given what Katina was just saying. It seemed appropriate and a nice overlap. So yeah.
I was supposed to talk through strategies to survive the next few days. We're putting together some notes. I wouldn't call it a toolkit because I don't know that it's going to be that pretty. But to survive these next few days, if you're experiencing food insecurity, as folks mentioned, there is a lot of food work and community work that was already happening. And the Saturday, Sunday before Thanksgiving is one of the most active periods for service in the country. The second most active is MLK Day, as an MLK Day of service. And so if you're looking for places to plug in, this weekend is a good time. There's going to be a lot going on. There would have already been a lot going on because of the food crisis that we were in before SNAP EBT. And then you add the layer of SNAP EBT, and there's even more going on. A lot of friends givings and that sort of thing happening where you can meet people and connect with people. The one thing I would caution, though, again, is don't just build power with people who are like you, because that is what our movements look like today. You know, when people move to new cities, they form organizations with people who are like them, and they don't take the time to really get to know the people who were already organizing the city, and they don't take the time to get to know the people who they are serving. You know, so really they're just participating in these charity models. The other thing that we need to be thinking about is wholesale purchases. A lot of y'all have Costco, BJ, Sam's Club cards. I do too. Not Sam's Club, but the others. And that's not bulk. It's not wholesale. It's an intermediate price point between retail and wholesale. What you want to do if you're trying to get food for a lot of people, say, you know, some of our brown friends who are being attacked, or, you know, communities, neighborhoods that are hard hit, you want to go to a place like Restaurant Depot, or a farm aggregate, like say your Black Farmers Market, or in Durham we have something called Farmer Food Share, and you want to buy wholesale. So a 40-pound box of sweet potatoes is about $25 wholesale, and you would spend $90 to $135 at a grocery store if you were to buy that same quantity. Pretty much any case of anything, collards, kale, what have you, that's going to be $25. A 50-pound bag of red potatoes is $25. 50-pound bag of carrots, you know, roughly the same thing. And so Feed Durham is putting out a list with these prices, what you should expect to spend, but then also how many people that feeds, because the hardest part of buying bulk is learning to understand how that translates. Who does 100 pounds of beans feed? Well, 100 pounds of beans feeds roughly 600 white people, but it feeds roughly 300 Black people and 300 brown people, because we eat beans differently, right? So we'll give those breakdowns. And then, as I said, you know, grow food. All y'all who say you don't have a green thumb, don't buy into these self-defeating messages. I call them hate messages. First of all, the food grows from the ground freely. You know, you're just there as a cultivator and a steward. And yes, there's some things that you will need to learn in order to reacclimate yourself to growing, but don't give up on yourself. Like, I grow a lot of food, and transparency, I also kill, you know, a good amount of food through the learning process, right? But as I see those things dying, and, you know, like, you have to kill some things in order to learn, which is, you know, hard for people to accept in America. But you do learn, and life is regenerative, and things do cycle back around. And so, you know, be willing to put some food in the ground and to deal with trial and error. The easiest things for first-time growers: root vegetables and herbs like rosemary, sage. Those are the lemongrass. Those are very easy to grow. And cauliflower and broccoli. It's kind of hard to mess those up. Leafy greens are the hardest. And then some of these herbs that have different watering and light needs, you have to kind of go down in the wormhole and get very segmented and specific on them. But at least try. You know, if you aren't willing to grow food or able, then have 3 months worth of something stocked. Don't rely on your auntie or your mama who keeps everything stocked, because other people are probably relying on them and thinking about them too, right? So these old patterns of dependency that we've become comfortable in within our families, and that our aunties and older folks will allow in us, we have to resist it. They're going to be gone one day. I know that's a heartbreaking thought for many of us, me too. But we have to be in a position to, one, help them and not be so dependent on them, but also to pick up the mantle and carry things forward. So if you're one of the people who always show up at Thanksgiving and you bring the drinks, think about how you're going to eat next year if it's not possible to travel to Thanksgiving. What you gonna do? You might want to get in there and learn some recipes so that you can sustain your own Thanksgiving practice if that's what you would like for yourself next year and it's not possible to move around the way that we move right now. Above all things, stay hopeful, people. Um, it's really hard to see people being abused. Um, that is hard to watch, and many of us were born for this time and are not scared, determined, maybe a little tired, maybe a little weary, but not scared. And I happen to be one of them. Anything is possible in chaos, and anything is possible right now, especially these worlds, these supports that we have said we need and want, and I've always been told we couldn't have them because it's not well, obviously anything is possible. Like, look who gets to make decisions right now using our tax dollars. They've shown us that anything is possible. So let's get our anything is possible for ourselves and for our people.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And y'all go back and watch the previous show with Katina, because you gave a lot of good tips during that show on stuff that folks need to be aware of and grow in. You'll be happy to know that a garden is part of the plan as we tear some stuff up in our backyard. So I'm on it. But I also know we got to wrap because it's 1:30. And
thank you so much.
Thank you for reaching out.
Thank you for this, Katina. Big salute to you and to you as well, Renee, and of course to the broader Black Liberation Media family and collective, and to the Undefeated chat. Thank you for this as well, and for joining us for this more or less unscheduled pop-up. And of course, make sure you have the bell rung so you don't miss these kinds of pop-ups and anything else and all the other scheduled programming. And of course, we'll be back on Saturday, where we will, for now, bid you peace, unless you're willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to say. And we will see you on Saturday with more
Saturday
with Renee.